of philosophical endeavor of the contemporary mind, we now start the greatest philosophical work with this title, The Human Aspiration. And when you think about it, you will find that the human aspiration is the essential, quintessential starting point of philosophical thought. That the best starting point of philosophical work is the human aspiration. You must have seen earlier my definition of philosophy, in which, having defined many aspects of that philosophy, I laid importance upon the word significance. Philosophy is ultimately a search for significance. What is this search for significance? The search for significance is the search for meaning. There is in the human consciousness a sense. When you look around, whether it is by instinct or by sense perception or by reason or by intuition, most fundamental thing is you are trying to find meaning. That is the most essential activity of a human consciousness. And if you ask further question, why human consciousness seeks for meaning, it is because there is in the human being, this is the deepest point, there is in the human being can be defined in terms of aspiration. That what is most fundamental in the human being, all search, all seeking, is seeking for significance. And all search for significance is inspired, is motivated, is pumped, is impelled by aspiration. If there is no aspiration of any kind at all, you are devoid of consciousness. Even animal, even a bird, even instinctively, it strives. And there is something fundamental in that striving. So the most essential thing that human being particularly has aspiration. There is in the human being an aspiration. It is something that is incorrigible. the one thing that you cannot kill in a human being is aspiration. Whatever you do, you might have any kind of somersaults in the world. Go about knocking everywhere, anywhere, anything. You will come back to this aspiration. It is the most essential, most, you might say, immortal thing, something that cannot be destroyed from human consciousness, is aspiration. It's a very starting point of the search for meaning. And if philosophy is a search for meaning, a meaning of meaning, you might say, the starting point is aspiration. Even the discussion about epistemology, whether we can know or not, what is belief, what is illumination, all that has significance only in terms of aspiration. So even epistemological questions, which are now supposed to be the starting point of philosophy, even these questions have a prior starting point, and that is aspiration. If one can determine what is human aspiration, then everything will fall in its proper place. As I said, philosophy is a search for all facts. And the fundamental urge of collecting all facts lies in aspiration. There is in the human being an irresistible urge, is the aspiration. Human being is nothing but a packet of force, striving. And that striving is aspiration. If you can define this aspiration, if you can examine this aspiration, all the physical facts, all the psychological facts will come in full embrace. The best possible manner of embracing all the facts is in the embrace of aspiration. Therefore, if you want a good starting point for philosophical thinking, you should start with understanding what is this aspiration. If you do that, you are doing the most essential philosophical activity. And this being the greatest philosophical work, it brings you straight into the most philosophical impulse of man, on the basis of which philosophy itself is rooted. The consideration of human aspiration is, you might say, the most indispensable starting point of philosophical thinking. If you do not discuss this question, philosophy cannot be discussed properly. You cannot have another optional starting point for philosophical thinking. That is why I consider this starting point itself to be the quintessential philosophical starting point. And you can see that because of this, the entire book of philosophy, the whole book, is so neatly organized, because automatically the entire realm of all the facts necessarily come in the sweep. Later on I shall tell you many other starting points of philosophy. I don't know to burden just now with so many other alternatives. But many other starting points of philosophical writings can be also. But since human aspiration is itself the fundamental motive force of philosophy itself, this great philosophical work starts with this basic point, human aspiration. Now, while studying this book, you must underline it's a philosophical work, and therefore it follows philosophical method. And I had told you earlier what is a philosophical method. It is a procession of connecting ideas with ideas, with the starting point and coming to a conclusion. And while connecting ideas with ideas, you enlarge constantly until the totality is embraced. This is the method of philosophical thinking. You start with an idea, try to connect with other ideas, and in doing so, you constantly enlarge yourself and strive to arrive at totality. Now, this method of arriving at totality takes the form of what is called reasoning. Philosophy is basically a methodical process of reasoning in which ideas are connected with other ideas so as to embrace the totality, and the process is itself marked by what we can call reasoning. Now, what is reasoning? Process of reasoning. Process of reasoning has many forms. That form, each form may be called argument. You might say philosophy is a process of argumentation. And what is the process of argument? In every argument, there are three limbs. One limb is a statement of a fact. There is no argument without a fact. A fact which is articulated in the form of an idea. That is one limb of an argument. The second limb of argument is to show the incompleteness of the fact. by the presence of another fact. So unless there is an idea connected with an idea, a fact shown to be incomplete because of another fact's presence, you are led from one to the other, you enlarge. This is second limb of an argument. An effort to relate one fact with the other and there's a third element. There is a judgment whether that fact is properly related to the other fact or not. This judgment is very important. An argument is an argument if ultimately there is a judgment as to whether one fact is related with the other argument. And this connection between one and the other has two forms. Form of probability and the form of conclusivity. Whether argument is probable or whether argument is conclusive. A philosophical work is best illustrated when, first of all, an emphasis is laid upon that fact. By raising it, all the facts will be ultimately come into the sweep. A philosophical work is best when whatever you state demands a relationship with another fact and demands ultimately all the facts. And when one fact is related with the other with a kind of a linking thread, where the linking is shown clearly whether it is probable or conclusive. This should be the finesse of an argument, finesse of a philosophical statement. Now let us see. Sri Aurobindo starts with one fact. The very statement of that fact demands ultimately consideration of all the facts. This very question of human aspiration, if anybody says, tell me what actually human being aspires, the answer cannot be given unless you take all the facts into your question, in your consideration. It is the one essential fact. Unless you see all the facts, physical facts, psychological facts, put them all together very tightly, unless you do it, you won't be able to answer this question, what is human aspiration? It is one fact in the embrace of which all facts can be embraced and have got to be embraced. Massiveness of thought. Basically, philosophical thought is a massive thought. A thought in which the whole mass of totality can be embraced. And you will see in this chapter one entire massive, one fact which will emerge in this chapter, is one massive fact in which all the facts are interrelated, hanging upon one important thing, human aspiration. But to begin with, there is a statement of one massive movement, in which all the movements can be summarized for the human being, is the history of human aspiration. You might say that the first paragraph contains two basic arguments: a historical argument and an ontological argument. There are many forms of argument, as I said. In the first paragraph, you have example of two important arguments: a historical argument and an ontological argument. Historical argument is easier to understand. An argument which is based upon historical facts